She's led from the start. Every pole the winning one, and it's winning colors. Going away and making it going away. Winning colors. With it just like Kiwi looking victory. And down the front. Winning colors in front. Look at the Stevens. It's a winning colors by a head. Fire the water with Gary Stevens in the air.
Thunder Gulch. Now it's Thunder Gulch who gets the lead. It's Thunder Gulch, the drawing off. Thunder Gulch. Tejano run. Late run by Timber Country, but it's Thunder Gulch winning the Derby.
And they're into the stretch. Country House on the outside. Coda water down toward the rail. Maximum Security keeps on fighting. It is Country House on the outside. Maximum Security is so dead game. He keeps battling on. Maximum Security. Country House 1-2 down to the line. Maximum Security wins the Kentucky Derby.
There is an objection that has been posted on the board, so it is unofficial for the moment. There you see the unofficial order of finish.
He did come out at the top of the stretch, nearing the top of the stretch. He impeded the one-horse War of Will.
Right there is where number 7, Maximum Security, came out a lane or two, forcing War of Will to steady. But you could tell by the reaction of Tyler Gaffleon on War of Will that there was definitely some contact.
But it's hard to see that he did anything to Country House.
They disqualified him.
They did. So for the first time in the history of the Kentucky Derby, the horse that crossed the line first has been disqualified. After the objection, Country House wins the Kentucky Derby with Flavian Pratt at 65-1.
Well, when you look at the disappointments in this race, there's no question that in a race in which forwardly placed tactics are going to always be effective and beneficial, horses like Vekoma, Tax, by my standards, he just didn't break by my standards, the latter. He just got not, he basically came out slow and ended up, being sort of, not necessarily knocked sideways, but when he didn't break, he ended up being off the rail and, wide going into the first turn. Just didn't really come out of the gate in any way, shape, or form straight as a string like you would think coming out of the 3, and couldn't get himself into the race. And that's the key. You can have a decent post, but if you don't break, you end up getting knocked sideways, or you end up being in a position where you're going to immediately, like a black hole, a vortex just closes in. That's what happened to him. So he was a disappointment, but I think that, the buzz around him was a little overrated to begin with, but he had his chance. He had a decent post just like Tacitus did. I think Tacitus ran reasonably well. I've said before, he was coming out of a slow prep, and he didn't run particularly well, but he did run better than Tax, and I had said that Tax was going to run a really nice race, but as I said before, running on an off track, even with what I thought was an ideal post position, the number 2, didn't work out for him. And I think War of Will really showed something coming out of the 1 and running as well as he did, even though he finished a little bit back, and obviously, given the scrum that happened at the head of the lane, it could be argued maybe because of that he finished where he did. But he ran a good race, and even though I don't think that it really affected the outcome of him, it just wasn't as egregious or as it just wasn't as catastrophic as everybody made it out to be. But again, he ran very, very well, so he was far from being a disappointment. But I think a lot of the forwardly placed horses, Vekoma and Tax, really were a disappointment. Vekoma was right in the mix. He just fell off the bridle and just faded, really emptied out. As far as Long Range Toddy, he used the right tactics. Coming out of the 18, he got in a good position, got right on the pace, but I think that it compromised him a little bit. Be quite honest with you, I was a little surprised he was that close. But again, sometimes, when you get a forwardly placed position, it puts you maybe a little closer, or in the mind of John Court, maybe it put him exactly where he wanted to be. But either way, when it came to the stretch, he did have to put on the brakes pretty hard. It did take away his finish. And I will agree with Bill Mott. It can, really, really disrupt completely the momentum of a horse. But I'm just just not so sure, even if he had had a clear run, he would have hit the board. But again, for someone like Bill Mott, what's he supposed to say? Well, we believe he's a lawyer at this point. He's either he's a defense attorney or a prosecutor. And if you're the prosecutor, it's like, well, we believe what he was saying, but we convicted him anyway. So Bill Mott's not going to say, well, he did get stopped, but I don't think he would have won the race. I don't think any of those horses that got affected would have won the race. So why would we, so in a way, I'm a little surprised we got moved up. Trust me, that is not the mentality that we're dealing with here. He was very, very happy that he got moved up. So, but again, I just not buying into these other horses that were effective having a chance to win. And that's not, really spitting out sour grapes because I picked Maximum Security. Keep in mind, in picking him for the viewers, for the viewers out there, I yield no benefit. I'm in a non-betting state, in addition to the fact that I'm just not online on wagering accounts. Matter of fact, quite a few of them will preclude someone from a non-racing state from being able to open a wagering account. So I had no real financial investment or possible benefit from picking the number 7. But either way, a lot of horses in here just did not run pretty well. Roadster was wide all the way throughout. The Baffert horses just were wide and never ever got into position, whether they were afraid to take some mud, and I think that maybe was part of it. I'm not so sure if the trip would have been any different on a dry racetrack. I think it would have, but just you've got to be able to at least employ some intelligent tactics here, and I think Florent Giroux and Joel Rosario did not do particularly well. At least Game Winner had the courage to really give it a shot in the stretch, and you have to give him credit for that. If he can get any kind of a trip somewhere down the road, he's going to win a race somewhere in there, at least hit the board and probably get his picture taken. But he was 14, 15 wide. He was so wide, it was just unbelievable how wide he was on these turns. And I don't think anybody would argue that, whether you had a single penny, dime, or dollar bet on that horse. So whether you invested in him or not, you had to be surprised by that, them being wide for such a significant period of time, if not the whole race. They were wide the whole race, and it's a mile and a quarter. You have plenty of time to be able to make those adjustments, which, Flavien Prat made the adjustment in his mind from the get-go. If this horse breaks really well, I'm going to forwardly place him, and it worked out really well for him. Game Winner was next to last on the backside. So, again, not really crybabying and whining over, or as I said before, crying over spilled milk, just looking at the reality of it, and I think some of you probably will agree. As far as Cutting Humor and some of these fringe horses, it just didn't really work out for them. Master Fencer was a nice surprise. Plus K Parfait in running 8th, ran reasonably well, and Gray Magician didn't run so well. So it was interesting that the horses that won the preps actually did win for a reason. It usually, or generally when that happens, they run a little bit better in the Derby. And of course, Country House is a little bit of a slightly different cut from a slightly different cloth because he lost the Arkansas Derby. He lost this race too, but was moved up, and he ran a little better than Improbable did. But he used better tactics, used the same tactics that Improbable did, and was able to settle in behind him in the first flight. So ran very, 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 very well in here. And it'll be interesting to see how the Preakness shapes up. We'll certainly cover that in the upcoming preview podcast on the CS Racing Report.
They did. So for the first time in the history of the Kentucky Derby, the horse that crossed the line first has been disqualified. After the objection, Country House wins the Kentucky Derby with Flavien Prat at 65 to 1.
Just tell us what it's like to win a Kentucky Derby.
Well, it felt pretty good actually. It's a great moment.
There were 2 horses in the race that lost all chance to win a Kentucky Derby, and they were in position at the time to hit the board. I know the stewards had a very, very difficult decision. I mean, I'm glad I wasn't in their shoes. I'm glad I didn't have to make the decision in front of over 100,000 people. But, with that being said, I'm damn glad they put our number up.